Well, I'm Alan Leupold. I was born in Plainfield, Illinois. Went to high school there, went to Valparaiso University for college in engineering. I got my degree there in 1971, had a low draft number, and couldn't find a job, so I ended up with a company called Bergstrom Manufacturing and worked on tooling as well as short line agricultural equipment. They manufactured dual wheels for tractors, and we started another short line cultivator shields, things that are out of date now and non-existent that they aren't using anymore. And the owner was Walt Peterson, and he said he was going to get me a good job at International Harvester because he had been the test manager for the field test. And I ended up getting a job there in 1973, May 14th to be exact, and in the lab to develop HVAC analysis, test procedures. Also did some engine cooling work in the lab, as well as transmission cooling. And at that point in time, I really enjoyed working in the lab, and the whole thing was about developing these procedures because they had never designed their own air conditioning systems or manufactured them, the cabs. And they were going to start manufacturing their own cabs, and they needed to have good procedures. And interestingly enough, to do that, I tested a 1466 there in a hot room, and then we brought it up to Modine and tested it in the room that I was just in today. And that was brought back incredible memories back from 1974-75 time period. But that was the beginning of the specifications that we're working on. J1503, it started out as J53, if I remember right, the first one that we worked on. So that was pretty interesting. International Harvester was a huge company, globally known. At one point in time, IH was the 10th most recognized logo in the world. And I don't know if you've ever looked at an IH logo. It's an operator driving an old tricycle tractor. It's what it's meant to be, the IH. Look at it sometime. And that's what it is, an operator on a tractor. It's an interesting thing. A lot of people have never noticed it until you point it out to them. So I did a lot of crazy things in the lab, analyzing air conditioning and engine cooling, and ended up moving up to the design group to work on forward airflow. This new concept to get the air away from the tractor and blow it out the front end instead of draw it through past the engine. And that was my job for 2 years working on that. And it went into production. It was called the 50 and 30 series tractors. Unfortunately, that's about the same time in the 80s, the early 80s, IH was having all its problems because there was a truck division and a construction equipment division, as well as the ag division. Construction equipment engineering actually ended up in Hinsdale. It was called Hinsdale then, where I was working. They tried combining it and trying to keep everything alive, but it just didn't work. And finally, the construction business just fell apart. And Huff might have bought something. I don't remember who bought it, to be honest with you. Whatever was left. But of course, Tenneco bought International Harvester and merged it with Case. Another interesting thing, here we are in Racine, Wisconsin, talking about this. And after the merger, that's where I spent a lot of time, even though I still worked at Hinsdale. At one point in time, as things developed and we continued to pare down, I was the only person globally working on HVAC. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. So when we changed to from R12 to HFC 134A, I did a lot of traveling. I went to all the various plants all over the world, helping each individual product line move from R12 to 134A. So that was when I really learned air conditioning, because I also learned how to deal with different cultures of people. And the questions that they ask, some of them I'd never been asked before. So it really made me learn more about air conditioning to help answer all those questions. And I also do a lot of testing. I set up a test setup in Neuss, Germany outside, and we labeled it high-tech east, high tech to Europe, because that was what the lab was called back at Hinsdale, was high tech. High temperature environmental cell, high tech. And during that time period, I worked with ISO and SAE on projects and standards, etc. Forward airflow. One of the main reasons is to get away from fan blast on the ground. The other main reason was to keep heat off the cab, to make it easier on the air conditioning system. It's blowing it forward away from the cab, but it was also drawing air across the transmission, keeping it cooler, at least not having the heat radiate into the cab as much. It was a great concept, and we really hit our goals very well for air conditioning performance in the cab. Oh yes, an incredible amount of development on the fan itself, because fans are designed to pull air across restrictions. We were having to pull it across restriction, but then exit it also outside of a restriction due to the aperture of the front end. So a lot of fan development, airflow development with the shape of the airbox. I'm probably sure that we got patents on it, but I wasn't on any of those. Those are in the days you did the grunt work and you didn't get on the patents. My first patent, my name wasn't even on it, because I was in the lab then, and lab people weren't allowed to be on the patent. The design group has to come up with the patent, was what I was told at that point in time. It was a ductwork inside of the roof because the roof was leaking so badly and bypassing all the air was bypassing the filter and drawing dust into the cab. So we came up with a way to make an inner roof. We call it the inner roof. So that was fun. But I didn't even get on the patent. The design lead got it. And I was in the lab, and I said, when I read it, I said, wait, I was the one that came up with this idea. Well, you can't be on a patent. I was an international harvester. Yeah. My first patent was with Case after the merger. That was before CNH. And that one, my name ended up having to be added because somehow they said, oh, your name should be on this, shouldn't it? I mean, when it was published, they had to have an amendment to it. I get this award, and they look at it, and we're looking at it, and where's your name on the patent? And I said, yeah, where is it? That was really wild, so they had to amend the patent to get my name on it. That was for servicing the recirculated air filter through the aperture, the opening of the fresh air filter. So you never had to do any filter removal inside the cab and get dust all over. You service the recirculated air filter through an opening in the cab, which was the fresh air filter opening also, so that you didn't draw any dirt and drop it in the cab, which was, our competitors had a real problem with that. That they removed it from up above, and you'd get dust all over you and everything else. So that was a very good patent, and it was on a wheel loader yet besides, instead of agricultural equipment. Of my 13 patents, I have them on like 12 products, 11 products. So I mentioned how I worked with all the various different products globally. That's one of the things I'm really proud of, was working with so many different teams. I think I only have common names other than me on 2 or 3 patents from other product groups, other guys' names. So that's pretty neat, in my opinion, how I was able to integrate with all these various groups and come up with concepts to make the systems better. My simplest patent was on a backhoe, really simple. We made it so there was indicators and lockout relay on the high side, but on the low side, the indicator did not lock out, but the indicator was a little flashing light. We were able to patent that. But it let the operator know, instead of I got a high pressure or low pressure, immediately he knew. This was before they came out with error codes and all of that. Hey, I got a low pressure problem because the light's blinking, and I got a high pressure problem because it's locked out, because you didn't want your compressor rapid cycling on high pressure. The great thing about it is it would go away if you still had adequate pressure, because we had a blink because low ambient conditions, when the compressor first comes on, it'll draw down almost pull a vacuum at the first drawdown when the compressor clutch engages. The expansion valve is closed because it's above its maximum operating pressure, so that the suction side gets evacuated, if you want to call it that. And we figured out, okay, it's going to happen, so make it just blink and not shut it off. And if it stops blinking, the guy knows there's no problem. But if it continues to blink, no refrigerant, low refrigerant. In low ambient, in 30 degrees, 40 degrees, see, these guys are sitting in that greenhouse on top of a barbecue grill, is what we always referred to it. And they need the air conditioning running at 35, 40 degrees ambient, especially a backhoe. He'll even have, sometimes have to have the window open and talk to the guy, close the window. He's got his coat on. But the air conditioning needs to be running when he's doing it to keep him having fresh air. On large horsepower tractors, it's truly, in some of them, you've got a greenhouse on a barbecue grill. There's transmission. We've had 90 degrees Celsius, that's like almost 200 degrees Fahrenheit, metal temperatures on the bottom of the cabs, the floor of the cabs. So you got to overcome that, so you have to allow your system to operate in cooler ambience, and some of the compressor manufacturers would like to see them operate. So that's why we protect the compressor from failure. You have to have your system balanced. It has to do with airflow, compressor speed, and then pressure switch setting, where it's located, all of that type of stuff. Ambient will affect the amount of charge you require. So your charge determination is typically done at a high ambient condition, so that you have adequate liquid refrigerant on the high side of the system. You have adequate subcooling coming out of the condenser, is what's really important. Have adequate subcooling coming out of the condenser, so that you know you have 100% liquid in the receiver dryer, if it has a dryer, but 100% liquid coming into the expansion valve. That's why you typically have a receiver dryer in the system to handle those differentials in ambient conditions. Something that we talked about today in cab pressure. We are having difficulty on a product meeting our temperature goals in the cab. We have a dedicated pressurizer in that cab. And I ran some tests, and we determined we could gain 2 degrees Celsius, almost, say 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. The patent was based upon the fact that we needed to meet a temperature goal. So we reduced the amount of fresh air coming into the tractor by shutting off the dedicated pressurizer. And that way we were able to meet our goal, because we call it maximum air conditioning mode, and it improved temperatures about 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously during that time period, pressure was reduced, but the recirculated air fan was drawing enough fresh air in yet to meet both the 25 CFM and a 1/4 inch of pressure. The cab was pretty well sealed. That particular patent was for maximum AC mode, and no other company had ever thought of that concept. And actually we ended up getting another patent for maximum heat mode, doing the similar type thing. So it ended up as 2 patents. The maximum heat mode, though, we also had, it was dealing with the DEF system for Tier 4. And we also had some things with, to make sure you had warmer coolants, because coolant temperatures, it took longer for the coolant temperature to rise, because its first priority on a system with DEF in cold temperatures is to make sure the DEF gets warm. And if the DEF had frozen, it has melted. So that's another thing that we went to max heat to help counteract that by shutting off the pressurizer. It goes through the tank. The circuit goes through the tank, a little heat exchanger in there. Well, I first got involved in the lab, and at that point in time I was not a member of SAE or the committee per se. That was in the 70s. Then I represented the United States in a ISO meeting that was really important during the 80s. It was the adopting of J1503 to become 14269. And I got very involved with that. So after I did that, they said, you know, you should probably be in SAE and be on the committee. So I joined Did you see what I showed George Martin? Because that just blew me away when I'm walking through cleaning out my desk from Bergstrom for my second retirement. And I said, oh my God, I still have that page. I said, that's back in the 80s when I didn't know whether I was going to stay at International Harvester or Case then and all of that. And here I met with George Martin at Signet. And that's about the time he and I both joined then. They'd ask me for the data and the things like that. And finally, it was stated, you know, you might as well get involved. I was a test engineer in test and development my first 7 years. Most of my work was on developing blowers, developing filters. We had our own airflow booth, like you saw the Bergstrom, but this was an International Harvester because we did a lot of air filtration work. And then on the products themselves, we did component testing. I did a lot of component testing on pressure switches, thermostat switches, blowers. I'm trying to think of what else. That was the three main things back then. Compressors and clutches. I had a life test going on compressors in the dust chamber. That was one of my first projects there. But the main thing was on the product, to develop a methodology of how do we analyze AC performance in the cab. When the guy's sitting there and doing this, how important it is, okay, where should we put thermocouples, finding the locations for them. And we'd run and cooling tests. We'd call them AC cool down tests or pull down tests. One of my most interesting days ever is I was in the hot room running a 110 degree test on a tractor for AC performance. And then at the same time I was running that was on a current product for the new product that we were developing, and we were running heater tests at 20 below zero. And the cranking motor wouldn't start. So guess who gets to change a cranking motor at 20 below zero, back and forth then to the 110 degrees. I went back and forth that day 3 times because had to put the cranking motor, a new one, back in. First we analyzed what's going on. It was the cranking motor that didn't work. You're out there freezing. Come out, rip off the coats and everything, go in and sweat like you wouldn't believe in the 110 degrees because I was taking a lot of hand readings, if you will, back in the days before we had computers. You know, this is 1974 time period when everything's on gauges, analog at the most, if you're lucky. And then I came home that night the most exhausted I think I ever was. The only other time I was more exhausted was when we were doing field testing in Arizona at our proving grounds. That would have been 1977. We had just bought our Dodge van. Penny and I went out with the kids. It was our vacation. Got there. It was 113 degrees, which we expected. 33% relative humidity. Look at your psychrometric chart sometime and see how much moisture that is per pound of dry air. A lot. A lot. It'd probably be equal to 85, 90% at 100 degrees. It was moist. Really, and we were tearing things apart, and I came home that night. I told Penny, I don't think I can manage this as hot as it is. And that particular building had a water cooler, evaporative cooler. It wasn't doing a bit of good. Probably it was even higher than 35%, but it was 113 degrees. It was moist. 2 days later, I finally said, oh man, I'm getting used to it. And we looked, it was 109 degrees, but only 5% relative humidity. It makes a difference. Saskatoon, it was not too far from Phoenix. And it was, like you say, a center because they didn't do much testing there. All the testing was done on the ranches. There was all life testing, you know, durability testing on the product. But what better place to get air conditioning data as out there. Did a lot of testing, and it was amazing. One year when we were going from R12 to 134A, working with sand, and we had 8 units out there total that I had instrumented. How often do you think the compressor cycles on tractors out in Arizona? How often you would think it'd go on and off? We were getting an average of a compressor cycle every 2 minutes for the fleet. One tractor was more than one a minute. The drivers weren't keeping them on. They would have them just barely set to keep them a little bit cool. That's what blew us away. They were used to, a lot of the drivers were immigrants, and they didn't like it cold air blowing on them. They said, well, we go home at night that we can't get that, so I'm not going to get used to it here. That was amazing. So we got a lot of good compressor cycling data for Sandon out in Arizona, of all places. They were the Sandon 7H15. We were developing the sealed heavy-duty clutch. That's one of the main things we were working out with at that point in time, to keep dust out of the front shaft seal. They had not yet developed the lip seal. It was still the old carbon type seal with the pressure spring holding it against the front plate. The dirt would get in it and ruin them, you know, fail them. Well, I've been involved with the Air Cleaner Committee. I've been to a lot of meetings with those, but I've never been in a leadership role. I don't even know if I was on the, I'm on the mailing list for 3 committees. ICC, I've been involved with that and been very vocal in the 90s and early 2000s about what was happening with 134A, etc. Gotten to know Gene Dinetti because of that, pretty much. But this is the HFTC6 is the one I'm most involved with. I've always been in the back, helping with the standards themselves, helping write them, helping determine what the specs should be. That's what I did mostly. The leadership role is after Larry Williams passed, you know, after he left the group, because he was leader for 20 years. It was he and George Martin. 1995, I got called by Jerry Looney asking me about, are you involved with MACS or anything? I said, no, I've been to a MACS show or 2, but never MACS. He says, you know, that they're thinking about getting more involved with off-highway. Would you mind meeting up with Gordon Marks and talking to him and seeing about just a meeting? It was going to be a meeting down in New Orleans in 1995. I said, sure, that sounds, I had to talk to my management, of course. That sounds doable to me. And I went down there, and gosh, Barb Glowey of CAT had a presentation prepared, and I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do here? So I don't even remember, other than writing up some things real quickly and starting talking about CASE a little bit, the fact that it's a merger between now International Harvester and CASE. That's why you see Case IH out there. The next year I got asked to come back again, which was quite pleasing, and did a little bit better preparation. And the next year, Simon Elijah had challenged us, and I had put together a program with our interns. We had 4 of them in Iowa State University, and they were in the ag department, all of them, ag engineering. And it was interesting that they were willing to build a pseudo-calorimeter for us for refrigerant analysis, and we analyzed all the alternative refrigerants that were out there, the main ones, I'll say it that way. And we proved that some of them were absolutely not usable. Even though they claimed they were better, they weren't, because several of them had low pressures in the system. And 134A had already lowered low pressures, suction pressures. And I'd already mentioned to you, and we talked about the low pressure switch. They were preventing operation practically in low ambient conditions. Yes, some of them did have good performance at high ambient temperatures. We had some oil migration with some of them. They didn't carry the oil as well. I presented it at MACS, and one of the companies, they were going to sue us even after what I had presented. And I said, well, you're going to sue CASE, you're going to sue MACS, and you're going to sue Iowa State University, because that's who helped develop this data. Never happened. Never happened. We were looking at was being used in the field for retrofitting. R12A, I believe, was the one that was propane and butane, and the systems just, I presented one of those photographs of blowing up the cab by somebody lighting us, pretending, we lit a lighter remotely, made by making a little spark. And you don't want to leak in the cab with those. But the main one was the one that lowered pressures. That they were really pushing it hard because they did have decent performance. Nothing performed as well as 134A, other than the butane and propane one. That one performed really well. The flammability. We had one compressor come back in 12 pieces. Somehow it exploded. So I'm on my third term. The first time I ran, I won. It happened to be coincidental with Gary Hansen. We have won awards together at MACS coincidentally 3 times, if you want to call it becoming a member of the board. He and I got technical merit awards together one year, and that was shortly after I had done that information, provided the information about the different refrigerants. Then we won the Pioneer Award together, and then that was kind of nice, fun doing things with Gary Hansen, even though during that time period he was not a competitor, he was a supplier, but then now on the board with him as a competitor, it was fun. It was fun. That's the one thing about that board. It is so workable. It is so fluent. People get along and they do things. It's a really good working board. I didn't know whether I could run ever, but when I became an employee of Bergstrom, I asked about it because I had thoughts about running when I was at CNH. But when I got to Bergstrom, I went and talked to him, and I've been there 7 years, and I'm on the board now 6. In the whole scheme of things, I think the off-highway is becoming more important. MACS is becoming more important for off-highway because there's many more dealerships in the ag and construction equipment industry that don't have experts in their service department, that they cannot afford training people, especially if 1234YF comes up. They're going to also have now another new machine. That was a big thing during retrofit time period, our changeover at R12 to 134A. I got to buy another machine, that type of thing. So I see 1234YF maybe even slowing a few other dealerships down. It's great to get the information to the independent service technicians. And MACS is an incredible venue to do that. One of the things that Gary, Dan, and I talked about, we connived a little bit, if you want to call it that. Let's really push hard on getting service techniques and service information to our audience that is important to them to service that red, green, blue, yellow tractor, late combines, etc. And I think the orange ones too, because I think Sherwood's really helped pick that up with Dan. And I think Case did an incredibly good job. And I think our retrofit program, I don't know if you knew that, Simon helped our retrofit program. He developed with myself and a gentleman named Nick Bolwig a pamphlet, if you will, a service bulletin flyer that we handed out at MACS for retrofit. And he had MACS name on it and Case IH. He had all our logos on it and everything. It was awesome. And I think that was one of the other things that really helped push me forward with MACS. That, hey, you're helping me, I'm not just helping you. How many times did I come back and write an email, or back then maybe even a telex, I don't remember what it was. I was able to meet at one show with 7 different suppliers with little half-hour meetings or hour meetings on issues, especially during the 134A changeover days. How much would it have cost me to do that if I'd have to go to each of their facilities, or for all the time it would take for each of them to try to get to me? It was all there. The Parker Hannafins, the Sandons, the TCCIs, or York, or whatever, the Zexel. I could go on, Eaton and everywhere else, the various companies. Spall, Aurora even had a booth, I think, one year. I can't remember all the different companies. And I just set up all these meetings, RevCore, etc., to get things done. Incredibly beneficial thing to do that as an engineer, So that's away from the real meaning of MACS is helping the service technicians, but it helped me tremendously also. It helps you understand what's happening in the industry, especially as EPA became more and more involved with governing refrigerant. It was very good to come there and hear what's going on. And so that, I guess maybe that's when you asked about MACS, how I got involved, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to run for board, because I saw the need for the off-highway group to get as much information as possible, and let's work with them, because they still, you know, there's tractors out there 40 years old, 30 years old, still running. Literally, I've gotten questions this year already about, I still got an R12 system. You think I should retrofit? And I looked at them and I said, if you can get R12, keep it going. If you have some dealer locally that you can get it from, keep it going. I know it was very difficult for me to, convince certain management that we're going to get something out of this. That our products are going to get serviced better, that we're going to get the information to people, that they're not going to be complaining, hey, I can't keep my AC system running because the dealership down the street doesn't know how to service it. I said, we need to, you don't ever want anybody buying a different color tractor because the AC system's not working because that dealership doesn't know how to service it. I said, we'll do as much as we can here at the marketing level and at the service level within International Harvester and Case, et cetera, Case IH and Case CNH, et cetera. But if you can get the independent guy knowing how to do it and keep that customer happy, it's helping us as well. Because they're not going to trade that New Holland tractor in for a John Deere. Over the years, I've done an awful lot of things. A lot for the community. I've done that. In fact, in 1991, I was awarded the Case Community Service Award for. I was a township trustee, and I managed the girls softball team and managed a co-ed soccer team, and was president of the JCs at that point in time. And we had a tornado come through Plainfield, Illinois, killed 28 people that day. It was one of the weirdest, well, Category 5 tornadoes. And it came from the opposite direction, so it caught everybody wrong. Instead of coming from the southwest to the northeast, it came from the northwest to the southeast. And so anyway, I've always enjoyed helping the community and do things. I have a hobby, which is still involved with the ag and construction industry. I collect toys. And I go to toy shows, as many as 15 a year, and buy, sell, and trade. Many of them are one-day shows, but a lot of them are 2 or even 3 days. So that keeps me very, very busy. I've always played softball till last year. I was on a team. I like boating, and we like to vacation. So those are the things. We've got a place down in Missouri, a condo down there. We had a place in upstate New York as well, and there was on a beautiful lake, and that was fun boating there. Our one boat trailer, has 2003, has over 25,000 miles on it, that trailer, from going out to upstate New York and back. It's Lake Delta. It's the reservoir for the Erie Canal that the Mohawk River feeds into it, in Westernville and Rome, New York. We like doing that. We like to do things like that. That's where my father-in-law lived. He had a little bit of difficulty dealing with his wife passing, and the day he called us up, letting him know, hey, I missed it. I said, Penny, get on the phone. I don't know what your dad's talking about. Penny, she gets off the phone. What's up, Dad? I missed it. What'd you miss, Dad? The spider on the refrigerator. They said, with the fly swatter? He said, no. My 335 or whatever it was. I said, what? She says, what were you doing? I was cleaning my gun. Penny right away and I both in unison said, you don't clean a gun that's loaded. We knew we needed to do something. We ended up talking to my parents, and we were in the midst of selling the farm, and I said during the exchange process, I think it's legal to rent properties to people that are not within your family. And Jim is not part of my family. And my attorney said, fine, do it. If it's going to help him, the best thing, he became my best friend in life during that time period, and became my other dad when my dad passed away. We became so close. He helped renovate the place and gave him a new lease on life, and we had a wonderful place right on the lake, 121 steps though to the lakes. So we even did a switchback road down to the lake so we could ride the tractor down. Those are the things that we do in life that I like to do, like to help people. Well, unfortunately, in my opinion, I see the high density parallel flow cores that if you've been in, and you have been in the meetings, the guys just despise, you know, because they're throwaway, but they're what's being done to get more efficiency out of airflow and less weight and less utilization of area, etc. So I see that happening. I see certainly YF is going to come through, 1234 YF is going to come through sooner or later for our industry. We're concerned about all of this, what is happening, because they're talking more and more about autonomous vehicles, even tractors. CNH has an autonomous tractor on test. And so we're going to have to work on cooling electronics. We're looking at cooling packages, compartments, and things of that nature more and more. We're doing an awful lot of work for no idle cooling. Think of all the vehicles, for work vehicles, that sit most of the day and then go and then sit again. Certain types of vans, police cars, ambulances. And we're working on systems that will run off batteries during that time period rather than the engine run all the time. Believe it or not, we're doing an awful lot of work with customers that are helping dry marijuana. Big industry right now. Canada's huge for indoor buildings, growing and marijuana and then drying it. And that means large dehumidifiers. We've been testing large dehumidifiers in our labs. We're doing a lot of work with buses, and especially school buses. So there's still going to be needs for keeping people comfortable and cool. Efficiency has got to be higher, these higher efficient cores, but they're all going to be throwaway. That's when you get in the long run, is that really going to be good for the, although aluminum is more recyclable than a lot of components, especially the all aluminum cores, so that'll be interesting. I didn't mention that I grew up on a farm, grain. When I was growing up, we had cattle, chickens, rabbits, things like that. No hogs, and that's where I started getting interested in operator comfort for ag industry, because I used to sit on the tractor with an umbrella and then take the umbrella down and I'll probably end up, God forbid, melanoma, because I didn't wear a shirt at all when I was out on the cultivator and cultivating. But my dad then, we bought a tractor with a cab way ahead of its time, supposedly, and I almost lost my hearing in it. My dad almost did too, and it was always miserably hot in it, that cab. And I said, I got to do something for operator comfort. That was one of the real striving points, I think, also for SAE. By my time on the farm, knowing firsthand what these operators are sustaining, dealing with, fighting with the dust, the noise. Once the cab first was made, all it was metal, nothing in there to absorb noise, no air conditioning. Oh, it was miserable. It was fine in the fall. In the middle of summer, you did not want to be in that tractor. It was bad. I didn't make it any better, unfortunately, but I have hopefully made the others better. Why I'm on the board? It's something I thought I could help with, and I really wanted to make sure that there was support in the off-highway, and it was, like I said, ironic that Gary and I got on together, so suddenly the off-highway had two voices that they never had before on that board, and I think it's really helped. I think, because I think that's the area where MACS is growing and not depleting. As I said, there's more dealerships out there that in the ag and the construction industry that they're going to probably be saying, hey, we're not spending the money. Mike had a good comment today about the guy operating the combine or whatever it was that was digging. I've never heard of anybody sitting 8 hours straight not getting up, but the whole point is that person was comfortable enough to sit there. And that's the whole point that I like to make sure that the person operating that piece of equipment isn't going to leave that cab because he's uncomfortable due to heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. I want to make sure he can adjust things. That's the thing, a lot of people don't realize how important louvers and louver locations are. They're very important. You can have 10 louvers, but they're not pointing the right direction, you're not going to get comfort. You know, and the Europeans feel, okay, you don't want air blowing on you. You don't want that at all. North American people don't feel that way. Give me some airflow. You know, that is, once again, back to those different cultures that I've learned about. I don't mind it blowing past me, but not necessarily on me. Make an envelope. But when it's really hot, I want it on me, yeah. And isn't that what our goal is? To make them comfortable. That's why this current SAE committee is awesome. We used to fight, and all it was red versus green versus yellow. CAT had their position, IH had their position. That's when I was not a voice. I was there at some meetings like, what the hell's going on? You know, there were two very strong people that wanted CAT and wanted deer, and our guy, we were still learning at IH. So this would have had to been in the 90s, late 90s, mid to late 90s. I said, we've got to look at system suppliers being involved. They can't posture a position because they want to make sure each of their customers are happy. I said, I think we should get, because that was, obviously I was still with Case, and I had been doing all the designs, and I finally was starting to learn how to work with a system supplier, because there wasn't anybody to work with other than me, you know, etc. And I said, now that I've worked with the Red Dots and the Bergstroms and the Evans, and I said, we should look at getting them on the committee, because they're the ones that have to please whatever customer comes to them, so they know all the specs. Bergstrom knows the red, the green, the yellow, the blue specs. They know them all. I said, let's find out from them what they think is best. They can't posture, because if they since they know this one and they know that one, and they say, oh, this one's not doing quite as good, they can't say that, but they can say what is doing good. And Larry, well, let's try it. And that's why I started lobbying. And now what do we have there today? We had Aurora, an old Modine, which was a system supplier at one point in time. Of course, myself, Bergstrom, Red Dot. There's some stories of my history working with them. Aurora's out of Mudau, Germany. Now apparently they have a facility in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But I got to know the owner very, 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 very well. And we designed one night in a Frankfurt restaurant an improvement on the blower. It was one company's blower, and he says, I can do better than that. And we designed an air vented, pressurized motors blower, air through blower. And that worked. It reduced current draw by about 5 amps because we were having thermal events in too many cabs from the motor heating up. I worked with him on the louvers. The first louvers that they were making just went like this. That's all they did is, you know. And I said, what you need to do is let's put a thumb wheel, get some ergonomics to it, etc. Did that. He patented that. I didn't get that one either. But he patented that, and the next thing you know, everybody's copying him. Revcar now makes 2 or 3 versions. Coyote makes versions. Carry Products makes versions of that. In fact, I worked with the original ones from Revcar because I wanted a second source, not just an Aurora, so a Germany source, because of the Deutschmark then. Yeah, a lot of funny things. He ended up telling me, sending me an email. No, back in the day of telex, he sent me a telex saying, we have now sold 80,000 blowers. You, your wife, and even your grandmother are guests of me for a fortnight. In this, I'm saying it like he would be reading it. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. You know, that's conflict of interest big time. So I told him, I said, no, I can't do that. I really appreciate the offer, you know, but let's just continue to make better product. Well, his name was Joachim Schultz, and he sold the company. I get on the phone, I said, Joachim, since you no longer own the company, does your offer still stand? He says, well, not the fortnight. The fortnight's 2 weeks. We came over there, he gave us his car for a week, and we were his guests. Then he let us keep the car for the second week, and we went and toured. Boy, did we improve. He really saw the issue also with the open wound resistor, and he worked hard in finding ceramic resistor to work.